Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. On today's episode, we're joined by Rakesh Makwana. Hi, Rakesh.
Hi, how are you, Mira?
Good, you?
I'm really good.
We're going to start with the question, which is, who is Rakesh?
I consider myself as a human being before any trade or profession. Someone who's kind and giving. Someone who's just genuinely trying to make a positive impact in others' lives. I would like to consider myself as that is who Rakesh is.
Let's deep dive into one of these layers, which is, where is Rakesh from and what was your childhood like?
So I'm a British-born Indian to immigrant parents. My parents came from East Africa in the early 70s, late 60s, during that period where they settled in the UK. So that shaped a lot of, I guess, who I was as a foundation of my upbringing when I was born, obviously. And I guess it's a form of identity. So in terms of my origin heritage, it's Indian, Hindu, Gujarati. I was born in 1980, so growing up in that era of that time, you know, to parents who had to do a lot in terms of work, graft, you know, make ends meet, you know, being immigrants into the country. There was a lot of values of this ethic of working hard, you know, you give everything you have. And unapologetically almost as well. Yeah. So this was kind of instilled into me. So growing up as a younger me, I think what I would like to add as well with this is I grew up with a lot of family support from uncles, aunties, grandparents, you know, and I think that played a massive role in my being of who I am today and even going forward because it laid so many foundations to my values in how I looked at things, how I value people, relationships, how I carry myself, all of these things. So I think early on, even though I guess as a struggle, it sounds of immigrant parents and the hardships of that, there was so much richness in togetherness of community, family together, and that really was instilled in me in such an early age. And I think that really was the springboard for me to continue to do what growing as an adult and having the success or where I am today.
You talk about this family, this community. What was that like growing up?
It was a sweet harmony.
Sweet harmony of Indian families. I don't believe that for one moment.
Loads of food, loads of people, so much energy. There was never a quiet moment. And so when I was born in the house, so me, my mum and dad and my brother, we were in one room. And in the other room was my uncle, my auntie and their kids. And in another room was my grandparents. And my dad's youngest sister, who was unmarried at the time, was in another room downstairs. So in this space, when I talk about family, it was this bubble of people always hustling, bustling, and then not to mention the amount of friends and family that would come in and out of the house. I was very young then, but I still have memories of this and even after. But then the food, the smell of food or home-cooked Indian food, you know, lingering, like whoever came to the house, they would be fed. They would not leave the house without being fed. So yeah, like them smells come back to me sometimes as well.
The Indian hospitality of our parents. Yeah. You've just talked about a 4-bedroom house, and it probably wasn't 4 bedrooms, it was 3 bedrooms and then a converted room or something along those lines. And you've got each family living in close proximity.
Yes.
What did it feel like to be in that space?
So with that proximity and what I speak about, I was very young. I was less than 7 years old, between 0 and 7. So I can't really say so much of how it was like. I was probably too young of that caliber. But the memories I do have of that period it was lovely because I had other siblings, my cousins, who I played with, who were my companions. growing up and having that friendship like a brother and sister.
Yeah.
It wasn't just my one brother, it was multiple cousins who were brothers and sisters. Mainly brothers, we don't have many cousin sisters. And just having my grandparents there was amazing because I was very close to my granddad. I was 6 when he passed away, actually, and he's still such a big figure of who I am today, you know. And I still have pockets of these memories that really bring a spark of joy in me. Like I think in moments in life when I kind of think about a hardship or something, I just kind of reflect back and think, not to say how easy it was, but it puts a smile on my face of what that surrounding was and the foundations and the solidness of it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. What did you take from those experiences and the younger years that took you into school, into college, into university if you went?
My father, he was a tailor. You'd rarely see him having a strong opinion or even have an opinion to make a point. He was an avid listener, always listened to people. And he grafted, he worked, and he never really said no if people asked him to do an alteration of a suit or whatever it be. I would never catch him say no. He'll always do it, and with a smile on his face. So I guess what I always took from him was this element of serving and giving. And sometimes you could argue, well, how much do you give before it kind of burns you a little bit? But I never saw that in my dad. My mum was quite different on the other hand. She was quite fiery. She was quite spoken in her own way. But again, in a similar trait, she was very giving through food. Food was her thing.
Yep.
She would feed people. And it would, you know. So growing up in the household there, seeing my parents, I think they were always giving to community, to their friends, people, because my dad had a shop. I used to joke and say it was like the Desmond shop, because his friends would come in the evening, they would have a chat, they'd have a banter. My mum would bring the Indian nasta, the Indian chais, and it was this comical element. And there's all these characters. You've got like a pork pie, you know, equivalent character, but individually, you know, and it was just a nice melting pot. So I would come back from college or school and they would just be hanging out. They would be like, Rakesh, what are you doing? What did you learn? Or it would spark off into a conversation. So it was always this kind of, you know, but they were just serving my parents. They were giving people time, doing what they were doing. And it never seemed like they were faced by the bigger problems, even though there were issues or, you know, in life, whatever. But to them, what I saw, they would just get on and just roll their sleeves up and just get on with it. Does that make sense, sort of thing?
And so how does that translate to who you are now? So how do your earliest memories of growing up, being around cousins, aunts, uncles, mum, dad, the shop, the tailoring shop, how does that come up? What comes up for you in adulthood?
I think one of the key things is the values of community, connections with people, and how I hold that so strongly now as I've grown up as an adult. In my early 20s, I knew so many people. My wife always jokes, she's like, how do you maintain so many relationships with these people on a deep level with so many people? I think for her it's quite exhausting. Whereas for me, I see it as like a superpower. I just bounce off people and I love and I get my energy from this. And that was coming from my parents because they would always do this. They were very social. So I gained that from them. And that is a superpower for me in that sense that I just love learning from people, talking to people, just be curious and just curious. I would people watch sometimes. I would just like sit in a coffee shop or something while I'm working and I'll just stare out and just watch people just because I'm in my head. I'm just like, I'm just making a story or some sort, you know, and I'm just
You're
curious.
building up a story and a profile of each person.
Yeah, I
and
guess so.
Giving them some characters and...
Yeah, and I guess that's the creative side of me and what I do, you know, in terms of, I guess, my profession. But that is the story element of, you know, making, some sort of sense.
What are the elements that you think about when you look back and you think of 3 words to describe your childhood? What would they be?
Good question. The 3 words probably would come to mind are support, love, and compassion. That's not to say I don't think my parents and my uncles and my grandparents had hardship, because I've heard many stories of that. But I think what they did for myself was to have a foundation where I was supported and loved, which allowed me to be who I am today. I probably have more hardships as an adult than probably what I was probably facing there, just because I was very loved, honestly speaking, I think.
What was important to you when you were growing up? What did success mean? What was that shining light you were aiming for?
I guess typically, like most perhaps of that generation, or I don't know, maybe it's in my head, but buying a house, being married, having children, all of this idea of material statuses of what success is, earning a good income. These were quite earlier on ideas in my head of what I thought success was, or what I believed it was. So yeah, that is probably, I guess as a teenager, going through school and studying and so forth. And I think overall speaking, it was very material success by objects and shiny things that determine the status of, okay, now to the outside world, I look successful, So that was probably what it was then.
You said something really interesting there, what it was to the outside world.
Yeah.
So success was external rather than internal.
I think the dialogue I was telling myself was probably internal, but as I've grown up, I think I can now look at it through a different lens to say, yeah, it was more projected of what the outside saw me as, and then I would label that as that becoming a success element.
And so now, what is success?
Still trying to figure that out. To me, what success is I use this term, inner engineering. Inner engineering.
Inner engineering.
Yeah. So success is only determined, I think, by my internal belief system, my mindset, and my outlook on the world. It comes from within how I feel in myself, if I love myself enough, if I'm comfortable in who I am and how I show up to the world or to the people around me. And if I can spark a bit of joy to other people, and I think this is something I've really dived a little bit deeper into, is when I can bring a bit of joy to people without any attachment of me gaining anything, but just pure from giving, that I've become the most happiest, and I've genuinely been ecstatic of helping another human being, whether it be through a work career path or helping hand or support list or whatever it be. That really gives me some sort of joy and success, and I think that for me is success.
Was there something that happened? Was there a moment where you can now look back and go, that wasn't making me happy, that wasn't success to me, and therefore it was this moment where something happened and my definition changed?
So obviously working for a company, making ends meet, turning up, getting a salary, paycheck, part of the rat race, so to speak. And I'm not saying it in any negative connotation. It was where I was, what I was doing. And the question, I think sometimes, what is my purpose? What am I doing? Maybe it comes with age or some time. I'm a designer by trade, and I still love creativity and design. I always have done, and I utilize that in my life and how I interact with people. And I think it came a point where I was doing things for the sake of doing it, just to make a paycheck.
And so does that mean you're no longer in the rat race, i.e. in a corporate job?
I'm a freelancer, so I'm still in the rat race. I think we live in London. It's difficult not to be in the rat race, but I don't chase money per se. Not to say we don't need money. We do, because of lifestyles and expenses and whatnot we have. But that's not a driving force for me. It's more going forward with the passion element of what really matters to me.
When did you know you needed to do that differently?
Right. So I have 2 daughters, a 5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. That shifted for me in a big way, on a real personal, human way. Like, and I guess you probably hear people who say, oh, when they become a parent, it shifts. And without sounding cliche, it really did. That was a pinnacle. I guess that was the root of everything, all the other things I was doing, whether it be for career, the relationships I had with people. And that shifted in me, I guess, because my priorities had changed. There was this other human being in my world now.
Money Supermarket Group are proud sponsors of A Class of Their Own podcast. Their portfolio includes well-known brands such as Money Saving Expert, Quidco, offering great cashback deals, and the renowned Money Supermarket, a leading price comparison website. Championing an inclusive environment where every voice is valued, they are dedicated to leading positive change. They collaborate with schools to promote diversity, educate on equity, and partner with charities to address key reasons for financial fear today. To learn more and help your household save money, click the links in the show notes below. When you think about the next chapter of your life, and when we spoke prior to coming on, you talked about spirituality. What is the spirituality that's important to you? Tell me more about this.
I'm not anything important. There's a deeper meaning of spirituality. There's something out there that's bigger. And that's always kept me quite grounded. And that's been one of my things that I'm constantly questioning right now with myself and in my path and life and what I'm doing and where I'm trying to go and where I am and where I have been. It's something that gives me strength and I don't want to say purpose, it sounds cliche, but it gives me a driving force to go to, like, why do I wake up every morning? Why do I get dressed? I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a friend. I'm all of these labels that we attach ourselves to in this world. But beyond that, as my soul or my being, I think I'm much more than that, or just a different part of it, you know? So spirituality is something that's really given me that drive in life. And my parents just recently passed away, both of them, my mum and dad, who were very big spiritual people. And a lot of the teachings that I got as a being was from them. And the understanding of the world, their experiences, and our relationship together. And I guess seeing my mum when she wasn't so well, her faith and her belief in spirituality, even on her deathbed, was so powerful. Meaning, when I asked the question, "Are you scared of dying?" and she looked at me, stern in my eye, with her hands up, saying, "What do I have to be scared of when I've got him?" With such conviction, like, and I was just like, wow. And I knew this, but to hear it and ask her on her deathbed is quite powerful, and it's something which I've had growing up, and seeing that from my parents has just given me this deeper essence of why I exist beyond the material or statuses that I label myself in this world, to being a father and, like I said, a brother, cousin, or so be it. Or even attached to our careers. Like, you know, when people ask you, how are you, who are you? We quite often label ourselves with a career or professional path. But hence why, and I get that, why people, it's an attachment, an identity, because without the identity, we feel a bit lost. And I think I'm always curious about losing myself to some degree. I'm okay. I like to think I'm quite vulnerable in the sense that I'm happy to explore or do things that are outside the comforts for me, within reason. But yeah, so this element of spirituality, it's interlinked in this. It's like being more than what I am, as what I call a label myself here. The spirituality, I guess where I'm coming from, it's a being and knowing. Let's call it soul, if you want to, just for label purposes here. The soul is never, I don't think, is born or killed. it always exists. It just, the energy transforms from here to there. So I look at the spirituality as some form of energy ball that transcends and moves around. So I happen to have one, I think, in me right now. And it's playing true identity to that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't even label it so much to God per se, even though there is that connection, and I do believe in God. What is God? You could even ask. But I think for this conversation purpose, to call it energy is quite powerful, and it's never born nor dies. And that's, I think, within all of us. And this is where I talked to you about earlier about doing good and helping others. Like, if I can help another energy ball, that's a part of me, because I all think we are all interlinked. So by doing good and helping others, that brings me the purest joy. And that's not a coincidence, I don't think, why that brings me joy. I don't think if you ask anyone genuinely, if someone genuinely helps people, I don't think that person can walk away and feel dissatisfied. Because by doing good or helping others, there's so much in it that gives both parties, you know?
When you think back to growing up and you talked about mum and dad serving, mm-hmm. and you used that word and you said, I use the word intentionally.
Yeah.
Do you think that's where it drives from, in terms of you're here to serve others? And I don't mean serve in a derogatory way. No, I mean serve in to be helpful, to support, to enable.
For me, that's exactly it. I think it's to serve and to help, and it does derive from them early stages of my childhood, where I saw my parents and grandparents and everyone do these things, you know. So, yeah, absolutely.
You give me the impression that you come from a humbleness. There's humbleness in how you speak, the humbleness in how you want to serve and make good, make better. Mm-hmm.
I'm happy with that observation. I would like to think of it as humble. Yeah, I would say so, yeah. But don't get me wrong, there's being humble and there's shouting about doing good, and I'm happy to be proud and celebrate my wins without being overly humble. But yeah, generally speaking, I don't normally like spotlight on me. In fact, I very rarely like it at all. But I celebrate the little wins when it happens. So yeah, if I can take me out the equation, if in a situation or conversation, and really be attentive to the person I'm with, to give them the time and really have their interest at heart, I'm not putting my ego there. So I think that allows me to kind of come across, I guess, humble in that shape or form. Or at least I think it helps the person see that I'm listening or I'm fully present.
It's the way you present yourself, the way that you use words, the way that you're articulating things. That's where I'm getting it from. I'm getting an impression. I'm getting a vibe.
It's funny you say that, because with my wife, I'm very particular. Not particular. I've learned language is so powerful. The words we use shape a decision, a mood, a situation, a vibe, you know. And I think to be intentional of the words we use is very important. That's in our control.
So I'm very aware that I will sometimes use the wrong language and it will send people off into a complete tangent, which isn't where I wanted them to go.
But that's okay as well.
Sometimes.
Here's one for you. I heard somebody say this and I thought it was amazing. We can't control our input, right? So what anyone says, if you said something to me right now, Mira, to be hurtful to me, it's not what you said that made it hurtful to me. I chose to process that, and I, in my head, allowed that to become hurtful, meaning my input is not in my control, but my output is fully in my control. Yeah. If we take ownership of what happens internally, hence what I said earlier in the engineering, if we look at ourselves, if we learn ourselves or unlearn to relearn, just because we were raised a certain way, We learn things. We have the ability to unlearn, to change things. If it doesn't serve us now, we have the power to do it. Should we wish to do it? I'm not saying it's easy. There's work that needs to be put into it. But when we understand this, language comes into it, words come into it, body language. All of these nuances come into play that actually shape our output, right? And when we are intentional of that, that's when we can see a change.
Have you done much work in terms of self-discovery, self-awareness? You talked about reading, podcasts, understanding during this phase where you were relearning and transforming, but coaching, therapy, any of those things to give you more insight into who you are?
I think I've always done self-discovery of myself. I've always done this in terms of conversations I would have with myself, maybe with my wife. I would often have these conversations. And even with certain close friends, we would go into deep conversations. Yes, I listen to podcasts, well-being books here and there, certain mentors I follow. But yes, I think all of these have played a part. And I have done therapy. In fact, I still do therapy. And I've always been fascinated with therapy. Like I think it has a negative connotation sometimes, or you go to a therapist when there's something wrong. But why not go to a therapist to grow and gain something from, right? Because we invest so much money into these careers, but for our brain, therapy is the most beautiful thing if it's done correctly, or even explored. There's no right or wrong to it, So I've always been fascinated with therapy. In fact, my first therapist questioned and asked me, "Why are you coming?" And obviously at that time, my dad was ill and he had passed away. So I felt kind of contradicting what I just said because I was in the situation. But it was probably the push that I put on myself to talk to someone to get a different perspective. But I've always been curious about therapy. And I think it's the most beautiful thing that I think every human being can do, because it can unlock things. Yes, it might be uncomfortable or it might not be for everyone, but for me, it's fascinating. I'm curious. I look at human behavior. Like I said earlier, I would people watch, and I'm processing, I'm just breaking things down sometimes in my head.
You've talked about your parents having a really big impact on you as you were growing up, and them giving you the stability, the love, the compassion growing up. The last 3 years, you said, unfortunately, they both passed away. What's that journey been like?
That's been probably one of the most challenging periods of my life that I've ever faced, and that's the honest truth. I don't think I was fully prepared for it. I don't think anyone is. It was challenging because they were my rock, they were my anchor. They were everything. Even though I didn't rely on them on specific things, they were always there, They were the support, the voice in my ear, the conversations, And I've used this analogy. So imagine you have a house, and my parents were the roof. When they both went, it was like an open house, and this wind's blowing and the house is shaking, meaning the metaphor is me. I was shaken to my core and my bone, where it was a sensation I'd never ever felt my entire life, because I came from love, support, nurturing, all of these things that grounded me. No matter what happened, my parents were there. And there was that comfort. And I'm the youngest, I'm the baby, right? Well, I say I'm the baby, got no older brother is what I mean. And yeah, when they went, that was really like, wow. And as difficult, and I'm still grieving and processing this, even like the other day, I bawled my eyes out listening to Indian hymns, bhajan, because it reminds me of my grandparents, my mum and dad, who were part of this. But that's okay, and I let that come and go. Everyone processes it differently. But one of the things that really held me together in all of this as well is the spirituality element. Because of the spiritual element of where we all are individually, it's given me this strength that I can't even put into words. You know, so, but this has been one of the most challenging moments in my entire life, that I've never faced anything like it. And I can't fully explain it because I'm still trying to figure it out. Or not even figure it out. I don't know if I have the words to kind of fully dissect or explain it.
It's a tough time, losing parent. I've lost my dad. But when you think about the strength that it gives you, or what you want to do as a result, has it given you a fight for something different?
I don't know if it's necessarily given me a fight to do something different. I think it's really questioned, or I question a lot, and it's questioning my being to look more internally to myself, these emotions that I'm feeling, right? So my therapist said to me, how do you feel about, it was when Dad passed away. She said to me, how do you feel about losing your dad? And then I said, I don't feel like I've lost my dad. Because by definition, loss is something you don't know where it is. I miss him. And this goes for my mum as well. I miss both my mum and dad. The physical being, the conversation, the energy, the physical space. But I don't feel I've lost them. And I get the sentiment of where it comes from. And I really believe this in my bone. I can't lose something. I can't lose them because their memories sit within, but I miss them. So understanding this, or the shift from them not being here, what's changed within me is to be kinder to myself more, is to show love to myself more. And this comes back to the whole inner engineering thing, because I think the voice we feed ourselves through the traumas that we have, there's so many lessons, yes, people could learn from these things, right? But if somebody, or at least from my experience, any hardships I've had, there's been a lesson in that. And it's made me, I think, a better person than I was the day before. Good or bad. But generally good, you know. And using kind words to myself, because if I don't, I'm self-sabotaging my internal thing, and then my output's going to be that. So, yeah.
Be kinder to yourself is a great lesson for most people, and one that most people can take away with them.
It's a mantra that I say with my daughter every night, Yuna, be kind to everyone and everything, but most importantly to myself.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
We started the conversation with who is Rakesh. I want to go back to that question and see if there's anything that you would edit, change based on what you said at the start.
I would like to think Rakesh is a kind human being. There isn't any much more that would change or change to it. Just this element of just being kind and loving, and just have compassion to other human beings and all things, to be honest. I'm probably butchering this, but my mum once said to me, show your enemies the same love that you have for your loved ones. And I don't think when she said it years ago, I never fully understood the sentiment of it. And probably now I'm still not understanding the full sentiment, but I get it in the sense that with any darkness, light will overshine anything. You know, with light, you can't knock the positivity down with darkness. I don't think. Like, even when it's horrible, if we carry a sense of positivity, that will go a long way. And if we be kind, even to our worst enemies, it goes a long way. Maybe not in the moment, but it will, and it has for me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. If you enjoyed that conversation, then please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family and keep spreading the word to those that haven't discovered us yet. It makes a huge impact on our ability to have the people you want. Keep being you through connection, learning and play. You are a class of your own.